He's a generations and behavioral researcher and also the co-author of the book Z-Economy, How Gen Z Will Change the Future of Business and What to Do About It. Thank you for taking the time to be with us, Jason. So how does what Gen Z is spending its money on differ from previous generations?
Yeah, what we're seeing Gen Z spend their money on, and we just heard about it a moment ago, is experiences. I mean, this is a generation that finally has access to spending, and sometimes we forget that. You know, they could get credit cards at a later age than previous generations. Many of them have entered the workforce later than previous generations, and they finally have the autonomy to go spend. And the social media, like what you heard about, really does put tremendous pressure to keep up an image that you have money, whether or not you do. What we've also seen that's not being talked about behaviorally is that many in Gen Z, in our latest study, 36%, say they will never be able to afford to retire. So if you're 25 years old and you already think, hey, I can't retire, I might as well spend the money now and have some fun. And that's not a great mindset. I'm not saying it's right. But there's a lot of reasons why we're seeing the spending from Gen Z right now. And we're seeing it on experiences. We're seeing it on stuff. Birthday parties, you name it. In fact, one of the trends we've been watching is this trend of showing your haul, which means you go shopping and then you film every single thing that you bought so you can then share it on social media. And then your friends go, way to go, awesome, I love that, which then creates this feedback loop where, of course, you want to what? Spend more money. And we've seen this push spending out over and over and over with Gen Z. And obviously there's a concern if you keep spending and you're most open to debt, and we've got still an inflationary period, what does that mean long term? Well, one other thing that's not being talked about, and our research shows this, 70% of Gen Z believe in universal basic income. They believe the federal government should provide a basic living wage for all adults. That's in our new State of Gen Z study. So when you start to put it together, it makes sense how they have maybe a different view of money and debt and spending, even retirement, than other generations. And that is creating a lot of concern and confusion.
Right, because to make the leap that you'll never retire when you're just 25 years old, what's driving that?
Well, they're looking around and going, millennials don't seem to have it very good. They're drowning in college debt, all this other debt. They're delaying marriage and kids. You can't buy a house. You can't get a down payment. Interest rates are 7-8% plus. All of those things suddenly seem out of reach. So if your daily cost of living feels high, even if your wages have gone up, you see student loan debt all around you, and you see people continuing to work past these later ages, healthcare costs through the roof. It's pretty reasonable to go, well, I'm 25, never going to be able to retire, might as well not save now. I'm just going to go spend and have fun. You know, sort of that you only live once mindset, but it's really life stage, not just generational, that we're seeing play out here. And what we are starting to see is it's continuing later and later and later. And then if you do delay things like buying a house or kids or a car, you can end up with more ability to spend. The big concern that we're watching right now at our research center is rising credit card debt with Gen Z, because as you know, not only is credit card debt going up, but the interest rates are really high, and you can create this snowball where you can't get out from under it. And that is a concern that we think needs to be watched closely.
And how would you characterize the financial literacy of people in Gen Z?
Yeah, we've done a number of studies that explore financial literacy with Gen Z. And when I mean financial literacy, I mean basic things in terms of saving, spending, interest, yield, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, all the way to more elaborate things like when you think about retirement planning, you know, that sort of thing. In general, what we find is much less financial literacy than previous generations. And what's even more concerning in our studies, we just saw this in a new one, that Gen Z most trust social media influencers for financial advice. So they're going to people online that, you know, look like they have a certain lifestyle and going, I want that, so I'm going to do what they do. And that's really concerning because we're not sure that those people necessarily have the right expertise or frankly have the right motives to be the key source of financial education. This is particularly true, by the way, on TikTok, where they now frequently call it FinTalk. So not only does Gen Z have less financial literacy or financial education, the sources they're going to now can be very concerning.
And that's even with, we often hear about high schools adding financial literacy courses. It seems like there's more information out there than ever before.
Yeah, you hit it exactly. There is more information out there than ever before. The problem is discerning what's accurate information, good information, well-intentioned is going to help me out. And it can be so overwhelming, it's hard to know where to start. And then what we also see that is not talked about frequently is much of the sort of like traditional great financial education or financial literacy is pretty boring. You have to read it. It's got a bunch of charts. It's just not interesting. So the learning style and even the platforms don't fit where Gen Z is actually going already for information. So if you're already going to TikTok or Instagram or YouTube for your information, of course you're going to stay there for financial education. And that's not where a lot of the traditional education is located right now. So there's a divide even between where this great information is and then where Gen Z is going.
Yeah, and even people are, if they're doing this kind of catch flights, don't catch feelings kind of lifestyle and putting it on a credit card. Yeah. How aware are members of Gen Z that, at some point you're going to have to pay that debt or just be underneath that snowball of credit card debt and the impact it will have on you long term?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what we find is that the awareness may be there, but the reality that it's going to happen may still feel distant. I mean, and Gen Z is going through a really interesting time, which sometimes other generations forget. Remember, Gen Z entered adulthood, came of age at a time when the federal government also provided money, sent money out to Americans. Well, that's never really happened recently in any way that people can remember. So as soon as you start doing that, it becomes normal. Right or wrong doesn't matter. It just becomes normal. Now what are we seeing? Well, student loan debt, we're going to start forgiving that. And so right or wrong doesn't matter. It's just, it suddenly becomes normal. The debt can be forgiven. It does start to create a different narrative, which people don't want to talk about. But if you keep saving people from certain things, of course, they think that it's normal, that there'll be some solution that's going to show up. Again, I avoid all the politics of that. Yeah. I'm a behavioral researcher. What's interesting to me is we just keep seeing patterns over and over again. And it'd be just like your parents bailing you out all the time. Of course, you think that's just going to show up. So unfortunately, as a Gen Z, expert and somebody who cares deeply about this generation, what concerns me is we need to do more to help them become self-reliant. And I think that's really where the education piece comes in, talking about all this and then showing them how that connects to what they ultimately want, and getting there in a way that isn't as challenging or fraught with risk as just running up credit card debt, which ultimately can really come back to haunt them. And we all want them to be successful. It helps all of us. So really helping them to navigate this time, I think, is incredibly important.
In your book, you say that Gen Z is going to change the future of business. I mean, what is it about Gen Z that fascinates you to the point that you want to research this generation in particular?
Yeah, I love Gen Z. Well, what we've uncovered as researchers is that the trends Gen Z leads or adopts are often picked up by other generations. So if you look at the social media they use, Gen Z are pioneers in that. Other generations are now following. If you look at how they communicate, how they shop, how they buy, how they look for a job, how they want to be engaged at work. So many of these trends Gen Z really is driving, and then eventually other generations adopt it too. So from our line of work is, I speak with companies and executives every single day, boards of directors, you name it, like that's my thing. They're trying to figure this out and going, what does the future look like? I'm like, well, the future is here. We just have to take the time to sort of separate myth from truth and really get into the data. And so what we're seeing is that Gen Z really is the best preview of the future. So if you want to future-proof your business, you've got to understand Gen Z now. And it's not about catering to them. Nobody's asking people to do that, or at least we're not. But it is understanding them and seeing how that fits as a leader to recruiting or job postings, benefits, financial education like you're talking about. All of these things are very doable. It's just understanding through real research the right actions to take. And so for me, that's exciting because so much of what is said about generations isn't true. And I have to go in and be like, yeah, that's not actually true.
Of course. I remember as a millennial when we were coming on the scene, everybody had something to say about the millennials. Now it's Gen Z. Jason Dorsey, generations and behavioral researcher. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. It's fascinating.
Hey, thank you. As a millennial, I appreciate your tie.
Always. That's right. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Bianca?